Well, after all the memos, the threats, the hand-wringing, the public outcry from places like the usual suspects in the Hollywood trade magazines and the national news media, the Disney WalkOut campaign actually happened yesterday, or did it? No, it seemed to bear itself out as exactly what I expected it to be, a gigantic farce. A lot of thunder and no rain. A lot of sizzle and no steak. And it goes to prove what I said when all of this Disney debacle started a few weeks ago with the infamous Florida bill, House Bill 1557, is commonly referred to by some as the Don't Say Gay bill. And what we see now is the reality of things to where, as I said, if Disney had just sat tight, stayed quiet, kept their response to what it was initially when Chapek came out and said, we feel like we could have done more work behind the scenes. We didn't want to get publicly involved in any type of political this or that. If they had left it there, all would have been fine, because the reality of what was behind this has come forward, and it's nothing but a bunch of hot air. And today, as many of you have been requesting for the last couple of weeks, we finally got our schedules lined up, and I've got my good buddy here, Kamran Pasha, to help us go through this, and we're going to have a discussion. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. Renegade Online. All right, folks, welcome back. Well, here we are as promised, and it's been a little while, Kamran, so I'm glad you made it back. Like I said, we've had some scheduling issues. I've been so busy the last couple of weeks. And before we start, I just want to remind everybody, you know, YouTube has been acting kind of a little crazy lately, not just with my channel, but with a lot of channels out there I've been talking to. View counts are way down. Subscriptions have hit walls in terms of growth. So please make sure you're still subscribed to this channel. If you're not, please make sure you hit that subscription bell, hit the subscription button and the notification bell to make sure you get notified when these videos come out. And a big help to videos like this to help me retrain YouTube to what we're doing here. Make sure you hit that like button and hit that share button down there. Send it out on your social medias like Facebook, Twitter, whatever you might be using out there. That is a huge help. And leave a comment below this video before you head out the door today. And also, on that note, make sure you check out the links in this video. Not only am I going to have the links for the 2 or 3 previous videos that we have done on this topic as this news has broken in the last few weeks, but Kamran Pasha's Patreon link will be down there. Very important you hit that one. Make sure you go check him out and subscribe to Kamran on Patreon, because again, this is where a lot of these conversations tend to start. So Kamran, welcome back. Good to see you. So we got a lot to discuss. We got a lot to catch up on. I don't think we need to go through a lot of the details. You and I have discussed these on various videos here and other channels. Today is to kind of get a post-mortem on this, because the part that we haven't covered was the end game, was something I expected that was going to happen. This whole Disney walkout thing turned into a giant farce.
Even though the trades represented it otherwise, but that was just obfuscation. The reality was it was a failure.
It was a massive failure of epic proportions. Disney is a company, to put it bluntly, of 200,000 employees or so. 80,000 of those employees are in Florida. One guy showed up with a sign in Florida. One guy. There were probably 20 or 30 cameras there from news media outlets. One guy showed up in Florida to protest this, and maybe about 100 or so out there in Disney's liberal stronghold of Anaheim and Burbank.
And we don't even know how many of those 100 were actually employees or
exactly. We don't know who among them were actually employees. And of course, there were other employees that jumped out there. And again, this was all on their lunch break. They walked around the block a couple of times. Other employees walked out in front of Pixar and Lucasfilm and took a little group photo with maybe 20 people in it out of 2,000 employees at Lucasfilm and Pixar. Whatever. I mean, this was a joke. And to get into our conversation, to lead us in, this has been your contention, my contention. This was all much ado about nothing from day one. All Disney had to do was shut up and let this pass because we knew it was complete astroturfing, and this Disney walkout thing absolutely unequivocally proved it beyond the shadow of a doubt. But now, can we, and pardon my French, get the proverbial shit back into the horse at this point? You know, this has been a black eye for not because of what the protesters were protesting, but because of Disney's response to it. Instead of taking a firm hand and saying, no, we're not going down this road, we're not changing corporate policy, we're going to stick with our guns, and we're just, look, we understand there's people out there, and that's fine, and, you know, we love everyone, and we're going to try to represent everyone and tell good stories and blah, 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 but we're not going to get engaged in politics to what they want. Well, they didn't do that. They caved. So
well,
here we are.
This is the thing. Initially, Mr. Chapek handled it correctly, which was just ignored. You know, there was growing sentiment in the trades. Why is he not talking about it? Why is he not talking about it? Why? And they were trying to create a fight, right? And he just wouldn't talk about it, right? And then eventually, you know, the Disney PR people put out a couple of things that we support our LGBTQ employees, and that was it. Put out a couple of Twitter things like that. That's the level he wanted to keep it at. He just was going to ignore it because guess what? His rival when it comes to parks, Universal, ain't no drama there. Nobody even talking about it. Nothing. So why is it just about this? This was almost as if this was a concerted effort on him rather than on the underlying issue, because you're not seeing this drama happening at Universal at all. No one's talking about Universal also has a very prominent theme parks and investments in Florida, right? And no one's even talking about it in the trades in Hollywood. So this is a very clear attack, right? And so he handled it correctly. The trigger event that I think created the cascade, and now you're seeing the financial press talking about it because I believe Fortune and other financial press talking about it. It was Mr. Iger, the predecessor, who decided to get involved in this and did that on purpose to push the situation. He decided to put out some tweets with his strong opinions on this Florida legislation, and of course, being who he is, the man who was just 3 months ago the chairman and CEO of, or at least the chairman of Disney, it immediately allowed Mr. Chapek's adversaries to go, see, look, the former guy did this. He already spoke out. So why aren't you speaking out? So the mistake happened at this moment, which was that was a trap. That was a baited trap by Mr. Iger, right? And I'm sure this didn't come directly from Mr. Chapek. I'm sure there are a lot of internal discussions amongst the board, because it's clear to me that the board had decided we're out of this, right? We don't want to be involved in this, just like the board at Universal is not getting involved in this, right?
Right.
So they decided this isn't it. And, you know, as we talk about Susan Arnold, the new boss, Chapek's boss, is herself a member of the LGBTQ community. She's lesbian, right? And so obviously she's come to the conclusion, as far as I can tell, that she wanted the company out of this, whatever her personal feelings may be on this. I don't know what her personal feelings on this legislation are. And that's kind of the point, that these should be personal matters, you know, and it's not the company's issue. She seems to have, I don't think Mr. Chapek could have been I'm going to stepping away from this unless his boss had said that's okay with me, right? So now they made the mistake, which created the cascade, which they put out that memo, which was leaked to me before it even got leaked to deadline. The Monday morning I got at 8:30 a.m., I got an email from a Patreon member who was a Disney employee who just sent me the memo, that long, lengthy memo, which on one level seems perfectly rational, which is Mr. Chapek explaining why he didn't want the company involved in this and saying bluntly obvious things like, we have always donated to all politicians because we need to keep, you know, political relationships in Florida from both parties. That's self-evidently true. But, you know, this was exactly the kind of thing that would then allow the ideologues to then glom onto different things where he said this, that line, this, that. It all shows how insensitive you are. You're putting money over ideals and human rights and all this stuff. So that was a trap, because that was the mistake. Had he just continued to ignore it and not taken Bob Iger's bait, this would have blown over, because the world is in chaos right now. There's Ukraine. There's a lot of stuff happening. There's China. A lot of stuff happening right now. Then the press will move on to other things if they weren't given red meat. So this was the red meat that caused it. So then, of course, the activists then decided, we got our moment. And they created the pressure and the media pressure. And again, internal media pressure in Hollywood with the trades. It wasn't like the New York Times was creating a big deal about it. This was Deadline and Variety in particular. Hollywood Reporter has always been very sympathetic to Chapek, was at least trying to explain his point of view. The other two were attacking. And so then that mistake was compounded by, I think, an even bigger mistake, which is then they reversed course and said, okay, we apologize. And they basically gave in to the claim of their adversary, which is you're a bunch of insensitive buffoons and all this stuff, which is they weren't. They were very aware of the choices they were making for strategic business decisions, and they laid them out. And now they're basically, well, yeah, forget that memo. You're right. We were insensitive buffoons. We're so sorry. I need to learn more about this subject. Let me have lots of, meeting members of the community, blah, 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 so you can educate me, ignorant person, right? And that was mistake number 2.
Yeah, so that was the second memo for everybody watching. The second memo 2 days after that Friday after the Wednesday annual stockholder meeting, which I said the second memo, that was the grand mistake.
Yeah. I personally, I think the first memo shouldn't even. I think you should just continue to ignore it. But the first memo got out. The second was the colossal mistake, because now you can never apologize to people like this, because then they've got their red meat and they won't stop. Right now, their goal is, now you've shown weakness. Right, because they're bullies, and the moment you show any weakness, they come in for the kill. And so then they can continue to create more media and press drama around this, with the idea that Mr. Chapek is hated by the people of Disney and hated by the employees, and his time has come to an end and all this stuff. And I got worried that maybe his time is coming to an end, because I've worked in Hollywood long enough to know that this particular topic can be a red button topic. Anything that is seen as disrespectful to the LGBTQ community has long been a red line for the industry, right? So I've seen that. And we're going to talk about examples of how it was handled differently in other situations, right? So then now the last few days has been the apology tour. I'm so sorry. Let me have this, meeting here with this and that person. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Here's lots of money to support this bit of legislation or anti-legislation. Here's lots of money to fight this legislation in Texas. But of course, that won't be enough, because now they smell blood, and the sharks are like, they're not going to stop until Chapek himself resigns in humiliation, right? Which I don't think is what's going to happen, but that's certainly the goal. And then
he's going to resign. No.
Yeah. And so that ramped up to we're going to have this big walkout, which the trades were promoting, right? That on this day, all of the people who are sympathetic to this particular cause are going to walk out of Disney and prove that they care about their ideals more than their paychecks, right? And then when that happened, it was a bit of an interesting thing. And I followed it step by step on my Patreon. The initial headlines came out, walkout is happening. And nobody showed up, right? Nobody showed up. And Deadline had to, after a while, acknowledge that, that the media was standing by the Disney gates of Burbank and nobody was there except the media, right? And so then they altered the headline where they stated, but essentially they stated in the new headline that there's no protesters, right? But that doesn't fit the narrative. That doesn't fit the narrative that they themselves have been pushing, that there's going to be lots of protesters, because this is something the people of Disney care about, the people of care about. So they quickly erased that headline, but thankfully I screenshotted it, and I still have it sent out to my Patreon. I was like, look what they did, and they erased that, and then they said, well, no, but there's these people here organizing here. Like I said, people came out on their lunch break and held up some signs, and that became the protesters, right? And so they had to cover it. And
like this one, Disney employees across the U.S., one guy in Florida and a few dozen people in Burbank. That's across the U.S. This is the astroturfing I'm talking about, making this out to be like it's exponentially bigger than it actually was in reality. And this is what I was talking about weeks ago when I said, don't take the bait, Disney. This is just BS.
But again, I don't think this was. I think Chapek's instinct was not to take the bait. But I do think he's got pressure.
I agree.
From under members of the board. He has to. It's not just Susan Arnold. There's other board members, quite a few of whom were appointed during the Iger regime. And who knows where their sympathies are? And so I think he was put. A gun was put on his head. Go do this, right? I don't think he put that apology memo out on his own. He was told to do that, and now there's the consequences. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of people panicking. I see a lot of people thinking his time is over, or that all the progress, the whatever little progress we've had in trying to put Disney on a profitable, consumer-oriented course that was just started is over. No, it's not over. What it is they've got to weather this PR, and it's an internal Hollywood media PR storm until they can get their moment, in my opinion, to clean house after this. So when you said your very colorful images of the doo-doo coming out of the horse, doo-doo's not going to go back into the horse. And I think that's a good thing, because now the doo-doo is out for everyone to see what the doo-doo is. And now you can clean up the doo-doo, because now you know it's there, right? And so I think that's the next stage of this, is that, and I'm going to use the analogy of what Mr. Chapek did with Mr. Kevin Feige, who rebelled against him openly, allegedly convinced major stars like Scarlett Johansson to sue Disney to humiliate Bob Chapek over how the distribution of Black Widow was handled. And And at the time, I said, I think he's going to outsmart these guys. Everyone was like, oh, it's over. Scarlett, in the trades were saying, Scarlett Johansson is coming after him. Big movie star. This is the end of Chapek, right? He's humiliated, right? And exactly as I predicted, he played, I'm sure he's trained in Aikido or Judo. He's trained in one of these martial arts. He sort of thinks like it. He says, the idea is you don't fight your enemy. You take your enemy, you take the momentum of your energy and flip it, right? You don't fight it. You take it, you don't resist it. You get the energy and then you turn them on their own energy and you put them on the mat, right? So that's what he did to Feige. He simply said, all right, I'm going to do what you wanted to do with Black Widow, with this Shang-Chi. Oh, it failed in comparison. Because I was right. And then Scarlett Johansson settled her lawsuit literally days after, as I predicted she would. Yeah. And that he just said, okay, I'm going to give you what you want. People at the time of the trades, it's hard. I mean, we all act like this was just 6 months ago. And the trades were like, he's capitulated. He's capitulated. He's broken to Kevin Feige and to Scarlett Johansson, and he's giving to the Shang-Chi what Feige wanted. Well, he did. He capitulated, only to put Feige on the mat and say, hey, look, your strategy don't work. I gave you what you wanted. So now, in my opinion, and this is a bigger PR thing, because that was international news. Scarlett Johansson swings to Disney was global news. Sure. This is much bigger emotional news for a lot of people. A lot of people take these events very personally. And so, yes, this is a very dangerous situation for Chapek, but I believe he's going to continue to Aikido this. He's going to, which he's doing. He's like, you know what? You're right. I was wrong. Come at me. I'll take it. Keep punching at me. Mm-hmm. And then the moment comes, he's just going to flip them on the mat, because they're burning themselves out. Now they're looking foolish. Even if the trades are pretending this walkout was a success, the very fact that they had to keep changing their headlines means that they know this isn't. And so the town knows that this is a bunch of PR nonsense, because the Disney employees who could have en masse walked out did not do so.
No,
so
this was, and the images that we've gotten, I mean, like I said, it goes to prove this was an absolute balls up failure. I mean, this is at this point, to me, it's hilarious. It's sad and it's hilarious at the same time. And again, going back to, because I knew, and I was right. I'm sorry, I hate to say it, but Disney should not have taken this bait. You said the same thing. And, you know, to your point, and this is where I have been on this the last few weeks, I agree with you. I don't think any of this, in terms of even the first memo, some of the comments made, or at least some of the tone of the comments made during the annual stockholders meeting, and then especially that second memo, no doubt, none of that was Bob Chapek's idea. No, I didn't believe that. Everybody said, "Oh, Chapek caved," and I'm like, I understand why you say that. I understand why.
That's how it appears to be on the surface of it.
It does, but the board of directors, and like you said, exactly what you said, and that's what I've been trying to tell, because I had so many comments on these videos and around Twitter and everything else, and it's like, guys, girls, okay, listen, chill out. If Chapek really was that way, then he would have been that way up to this point. He wouldn't have just come out and decided all of a sudden, okay, well, you're right, I should have been doing this all along. Yeah. And like you said, Susan Arnold is a member of this LGBTQ community. She surely, as the board or the director of the board, would have gone to chairman of the board. Can't talk tonight. Chairman of the board would have actually, tried to instill some new corporate policy along these lines. That didn't happen either.
This policy was approved by her. Bob Chapek consulted her as to how to approach this, and she said, we're going to step out of this situation as a company. People can do whatever they want privately, but we as a company are getting out of this situation. And he implemented her command, and then Bob Iger, who is essentially her rival, not even Chapek's rival, it's her rival, came out at her. This is an attack on her, right?
Yeah. And there's other members of the board who I'm sure were getting beaten down and harassed, I guess, for lack of better words that we can't say on YouTube, but harassed, I'm sure, by their peer groups and everything else.
And the harassment is real.
And they, in turn, as a board of directors will do, laid that pressure down onto the CEO, in this case, Bob Chapek. And because no corporate policy of this magnitude, where you're going to suddenly say, we're going to halt political contributions in the state of Florida, where we have nearly half of our workforce, 80,000 of our workforce. And then we're going to become political activists in all 50 states to support happen by a CEO's own decision. That is a board decision, and that is something that is then foisted upon the CEO to enact as the E&O, and that stands for is the executive officer. So, it's incumbent upon the CEO at that point to then enact and execute what the board has decided.
Yeah, the board probably had some internal PR guys who gave some bad advice, and they even paid some bucks to some crisis management firm.
They have their own internal, and this was another mistake Disney made. Yeah. They appointed an internal board to advise them on how to be political activists. It's the LGBTQIA advisory panel or whatever it is that Disney has. Mm-hmm. Again, this is Disney. They make children's cartoons and entertainment. They shouldn't have a socio-political advisory board advising them on how to be politically activist.
That's the legacy of Mr. Iger, right? Mr. Iger, because that wasn't what they were doing before. Michael Eisner wasn't doing it.
They built their own bomb and then installed it in Burbank.
Yeah. That's what they did. Iger built the bomb and took off.
Yeah,
and then he set it off from he basically left the bomb in the office and left and set it off, right? That's what he did. I mean, this is all his clown show. He's done this for his own agendas, his own personal vendettas, which I believe that's about. He's never going to become president of the United States. Whatever political agendas he had are gone. Now it's just personal vendettas of selling scores. He felt humiliated at the way he was pushed out, and the legacy of the company is going in a direction that makes him look foolish. So he's going to burn it all down. That's just personal vendetta stuff. It's ugly, but he's doing it, right? And so it is what it is. So now where do we go from here? So, one of the things I want to reference is something that I don't know if you remember this, Valliant. I remember this. It was about maybe 10 years ago, the big boycott of the major, I think it was the Beverly Hills Hotel. Do you remember this? Over Sharia law. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Now, okay. Yes. When you say that, I kind of do vaguely remember that. Yeah.
So what it was is that, Hollywood got on this thing where some activist has said that that at that time, the Sultan of Brunei, which is a Southeast Asian country by Indonesia, which is a very wealthy, oil-rich island, essentially. The Sultan who runs it is a Muslim Sultan. And, just like the domestic politics, when politicians in America say, we're going to make sure there's Christian values in our country. In this Muslim country, in order to keep his local politics happy, he said, our society is going to be based on Sharia law. And again, I'm not even going to discuss what Sharia law is. Everyone has all their ideas, but it's a broad range of ideas. But just that phrase, which is a standard pot-boiled thing the Muslim countries do in the same way that many Christian societies are like, oh, it's going to be based on the Bible, whatever. So that in reality, they do whatever the Sultan wants to do, right? That's the reality. And so he put that out there for his local domestic politics. And so someone said, well, isn't Sharia law anti-gay? So someone in LA said that, right? So some activists decided that this is horrific. We think they're going to start killing gay people in Brunei and throwing them off of buildings, which never happened. But that's what they said is going to happen. And so they decided Hollywood out of nowhere decides, we're going to protest the Sultan of Brunei. But the Sultan of Brunei is sitting in Southeast Asia, right? So how do you protest that? Well, he's a very wealthy man, one of the wealthiest men in the world. He owns a lot of property. So he owned one of the, I think it was the Beverly Hills Hotel itself, right? One of the classic Hollywood hotels that, Ava Gardner used to stay at, that kind of thing. And so, a place where people like to do business, a lot of agencies will have meetings there all the time. A lot of business deals are done in the restaurant in the Beverly Hills Hotel. It's just an old tradition, right? And so suddenly these activists came out a decade ago and said, Sharia law, we must stop Sharia law and save the LGBT community from these evil fanatical Muslims. And we're going to do that by protesting the Beverly Hills Hotel, which is sitting in Beverly Hills, got nothing to do with Brunei. On a corporate structure, it's owned by some entity that's owned by some entity that's owned by the Sultan of Brunei's national fund, right? But so that's what it is. But obviously, it wasn't like they're discriminating against gay people in this Beverly Hills Hotel. That's not happening, right? But this became the big drama of the year in Hollywood because they had too much time on their hands. And so they suddenly organized this massive drama. And I, as a Muslim, like, here it goes. Because now suddenly became like Islam is the enemy of the LGBT community. That's all you heard, in Hollywood. I'm like, all right, here we go again. Or something like, as a Muslim guy, I'm going to have to listen to this stuff, right? And so suddenly there was all these organized things. And it was actually more successful than the protest here that was in Disney because suddenly these activists had created this furor around this hotel, which had nothing to do with anything. And so all the agencies became terrified of the pressure that was building the trades on the topic, that CAA, WME, all the agencies put out memos saying, we will no longer send our agents to the Beverly Hills Hotel, right? And we're going to boycott it. And then For weeks out in front of the hotel, you would have large crowds of people with signs saying, down with Sharia law, free the LGBTQ of Brunei, right? And hundreds of people in front of this hotel. And this was the drama because they had nothing better to do, right? And this was their drama of the week. This, I think, was even during the Obama era, right? This wasn't even Trump, because when Trump was on, they're focused on him. So they got nothing better to do, so this is their drama of the week. So I sat there, I was like, oh, what's going to happen is it's going to burn itself out. Because and that's exactly what it did. After a week, it went down from 500 people protesting to 250. Week after that, it's 100 people. Week after that, it's 50 people. Week after that, it's 25 people. And then within about 2 months, there's nobody would show up in front of the hotel. And it was out of the trades because they had done their PR drama.
Right.
And they had done the right thing. Everyone had boycotted it. So about 2 months later, quietly,
everyone's back at the hotel.
Yeah. Back at the hotel. There was no memo that said go back. Everyone just started going back. And now it's one of the most popular hotels in Hollywood. And Sultan Brunei still owns it. So what happened is Hollywood just said, because the agencies were like, let this thing burn out. Let it burn out.
Textbook virtue signaling.
Yeah, let it burn out. Let it virtue signal. And they will burn out. And then we're just going to go back to business as usual, which is what they did. So this is the moment, because I've already noticed a change. Ever since yesterday, I could be wrong, but I didn't see anything in the trades today about Disney and this Florida bill. I didn't see anything more today. Unless you saw an article in one of the trades, I didn't see anything more. So they're not talking about it.
Nothing to the scale that it has been up to this point. The only thing that I have seen has been, and we're going to get to this real quickly before we have to wrap up. But the only things I've seen now have been, and of course not in the mainstream. This is, you really have to go digging to find this. It's the other employees at Disney, the ones that don't politically align with the apparently incredibly small, and based on the protests, we're talking about 0.1%, 0.01% or whatever of all Disney employees, if that actually attended this protest or did their walkouts or whatever. So, but there was a letter that was circulated from the other side of Disney employees, and I'm not saying all necessarily conservatives, but you really have to go digging to find this. And they say,
no trade reported on it.
Yeah, no, it drives conservatives into the closet. But I want to be very clear for everybody out there. This isn't just the quote unquote conservatives. This is just all the employees at Disney who are probably largely apolitical or non-political. Or
they may even be left-leaning, because these activists are so far out to the left that a lot of people on the left are like, hey man, I don't know about this.
Yeah, and their concern is that Disney is now not only making public statements, but they are now, as I have been trying to pound into people's minds, is that this is, Disney's always been like, no. Disney has never radically altered corporate policy to this scale when it comes to, in this case, political contributions. This is a very different animal than we have seen from Disney.
And by the way, on that Valliant, it actually is a double-edged sword, because when that came out, a lot of liberal activists I saw on Twitter were celebrating, that, they're stopping the contribution. And they realized it's all contributions, including to Democratic politicians. And then they got very upset about that. That's not fair.
Yeah, and to remind everybody, let's not forget, with Disney's 80,000 employees in Florida, the legislative makeup of Florida is astonishingly one-sided. Now, if you go back, and I'm not going to rehash this, you can go back to the previous videos. Again, the links will be in this description for this video below. And you can see that in both cases, in the House and the Senate, when it came to HB 1557 in Florida, which was the quote-unquote don't say gay bill, or the, as it's correctly labeled in the bill, is the Parental Protection Rights in Education or something along those lines. But the point is that it was voted along party lines. And if you look, okay, it's voted along party lines, well, it went 60 to 66% in one direction. That means, pretty much, folks, is that the House and Senate of Florida is made up of over 60% conservatives, Republicans.
That's super majority.
That is a huge especially in Florida. Florida's not a swing state anymore, folks. I'm just telling you. And, you know, from that standpoint, you look at it and you go, well, 80,000 employees that work at Disney voted in these elections as well. And based on that I-4 corridor right there, the vast majority of them voted for these politicians that enacted. They voted for this because it's not about you can't say a word in school. It's about simply we would prefer not to have our school teachers having explicit sexual conversations with our kindergarten kids, our first grade, second, third, fourth grade, whatever it is, kids. I mean, that seems like common sense to me.
Yeah,
I mean,
and some people say, well, that's not happening. I'm like, no, it's kind of happening.
It kind of happens.
It kind of is happening.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not like somebody's making up a false, like, you know, a witch scare. There really is a phenomenon of
Florida. And look, to Florida's credit, maybe they don't want to wait until it becomes widespread. They want to put the kibosh on it right now and take care of the problem before it gets outrageous.
It's not the equivalent of when various states in America pass, we ban Sharia law here. Nobody's pushing for Sharia law here, including us Muslims. So that was a made-up controversy because that wasn't happening. Whereas this is kind of happening culturally. We've
seen evidence of this. I mean, the teachers are posting videos of them talking about doing this in kindergarten, first, second grade classrooms on TikTok, on Twitter. It's all over. I mean, it's like
it's a real social phenomenon.
These memes, It's out there. But this real quick before we have to wrap up, because this is the crux of this, in terms of this kind of post-mortem on this whole Disney walkout issue, is that and I will go out. This is the silent majority of Disney right here, what's on the screen. This is the silent majority of Disney. Not only the employees of Disney, but more importantly, their customer base, the people who actually go see the movies, the people who actually pay Disney's bills, buy the merchandise, the families that are out there. I promise you, like I said in the previous videos, parents, families, they don't care what another individual does or who they might be romantically engaged with. Nobody cares. God bless
Most Americans don't anymore.
Nobody's going to throw you in prison for something like that. That doesn't happen here. But where parents draw the line is like, look, we don't want sexuality of any kind introduced to our 5- and 6-year-olds.
Yeah, who are innocent of all things. And they just want to play with their toys. I mean, that's all it is.
And that's where this comes in. And this is, and we're not going to read the whole, this is a very long letter. I will leave the link to this article in the description of this video. You can go read it for yourself. But the gist of it is simply that, hey, we're the other side of Disney employees, and we're not asking for Disney to take positions on conservative politics. We just don't want Disney to take positions on politics, period.
That used to be the liberal position, by the way. Get corporations out of politics. That used to be the liberal position.
And this is what this is asking for, and more importantly, stating in this letter how uncomfortable they are feeling at Disney. They are scared to open their mouths. They are scared that if they don't agree with a certain position, that their livelihoods could be in jeopardy, that they're going to be ousted.
That's nothing new. I mean, that's not like this happened a week ago. I mean, that's 20 years now I've grown up in Hollywood as a conservative Muslim guy, and I've had to watch my tongue. 20 years ago, I had to watch my tongue, and the last 4 or 5 years, you've really had to watch your tongue if you don't go along with the narrative. So they're just putting out there something to acknowledge something that's been a long thing that was kind of ending and has now been coming back with full force.
Yes, it is. And to that end, I found this interesting because 2 days before this broke, I received a private email from, and he gave me permission to discuss this, from our buddy WDW Pro. And I asked him what he was hearing from the inside. And like I said, 2 days before this came out, he was saying that a lot of his inside Disney contacts had gone basically radio silent on this. And the ones that he was talking to were saying that a lot of people in here are nervous right now. We don't know where this company is going. Is this really the direction? They're afraid to speak out because this advisory board that Disney has, this movement, this whole Reimagine Tomorrow stuff.
Yeah, it's like a Maoist re-education
brainwashing program that they have. They're afraid of it. And he said that several of these folks were reported they were scrubbing their entire social media accounts, getting rid of everything. They didn't want Disney or some of these crazy groups inside Disney start basically, going on witch hunts. And then this comes out, and I'm like, well, he's got the inside contacts that are obviously dealing with this.
I do want to say about this, at the end of the day, this isn't aimed for Hollywood. No one in the trades even acknowledged it exists, right? As far as the trades are concerned, everyone who works at all these companies is happy dappy lefty, right? That's what the trades believe. At least that's how they present it to the world. They won't even acknowledge that this is true, even though like I said, I've met quite a few hidden conservatives in Hollywood, right?
Oh, sure.
I'm quite powerful. But so this isn't aimed for Hollywood. This is actually aimed for the broader community. It's aimed for let's be frank, the right-wing media, and they're jumping on this. But I don't want to jump onto the alarmism because there's a lot of despair around this letter. There's a lot of, look at this, they're trapped. Man, they've always been trapped. I mean, like I said, I knew I was once talking to a LGBTQ gay man who was a major casting director. We were having dinner about 3 years ago, and he's like, well, I voted for Trump, right? I can't talk about that, right? But this guy, a gay man, very flamboyantly gay man, excellent casting director, very prominent. He's like, and he was very gay, all the reasons why he voted for Trump and all that stuff, but he can't talk about it. This ain't nothing new. So it's being presented in the conservative media as if this is something that's happened. This is a long phenomenon that got worse and was getting a little bit better and then got worse again. That's not what this is about. The issues that Bob Chapek are facing, it's not even about this letter. He knows where his employees are. He certainly knows where his customer base is. That's why he went down the direction that he did. What he has to deal with now is a dangerous ex-chairman who's out there trying to topple him and topple Susan Arnold for his own personal vendetta and using this for that reason, and dealing with an unsympathetic, propaganda trade situation who was trying to rile up people against him, which eventually, if the calculation is that PR gets so bad, the board says, get this guy out and bring somebody less polarizing. It's not going to get to that because I believe already see 24 hours after the failed walkout, the trades ain't talking about it anymore. Right? Yeah. They're just not talking about it. And I believe that's going to be an accelerated, movement away from this story. And so Mr. Chapek, I believe, will weather the storm. He will say all the right things. And people have said, oh, he said this. And he's going to say all the right things to get these guys off his back for the next few weeks. And then what he now needs to do, and there is no choice in this matter, he now has to clean house. Because all the people who put out at Pixar and other places publicly condemned him, the boss.
Yeah,
put their names on
ESPN, ABC.
All these people put their names on this and put it out there saying, we want our boss fired. Okay. They've just identified themselves as open insurrectionists. If he's at this point, it's Chapek or them. He either removes them or he's not renewed in next February, or even forced out before that if they make a new drama. There is no choice. And the man's a survivor. 30 years of surviving Disney politics. He's a survivor, and he knows he handled Kevin Feige that nobody thought he could handle. These guys they may be a bigger mob than individually Kevin Feige, but Kevin Feige was a solitary adversary that was a real problem, right? Now you've got these lesser powerful people that are mobbed together, but he knows who all of them are. If I were Mr. Chapek, this is what I would be doing. I would be having conversations right now through Susan Arnold, who's connected to all these people, with JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs about what do I do with Pixar? Can I sell it? How about can I buy Skydance and merge it with Pixar and bring Lasseter back and kick all these other guys out as redundant employees? There's a strategic way to remove all of the troublemakers and make it a business thing and wait until it's not like, you fired us for speaking out against you. Give it a few months. I actually believe, because there is no choice. He either does this or he's going to be out, because they're not going to stop.
I agree with you on that standpoint. Is that he's got to do something at this point, because this was clearly a business maneuver to try to shatter the foundation of Bob Chapek's position at Disney ahead of what should be an easy renewal in February of next year. Yeah. And maybe he has to play it safe until then, get himself renewed, have a full 3 years after that point, and then really go to town. Yes. Because this definitely set it back. And I agree with a lot of what you just said. I just think that it's got to be something that he's going to have to be very strategic with. And when it comes to what we just talked about, the letter with the employees, I agree that that's been in Hollywood, that's been going on a long, long time. I just seem from what I read in there, the way the employees wrote this, they know that that's out there, but this is the first time they have really felt this fear at Disney. Inside Disney as an employee, and I think that's where they were coming from. I'm gonna get. I know we gotta wrap it up.
Yeah.
Obviously, this all culminates with the video that I released this morning. Your final thoughts on this? The video I did this morning. Please, everybody, go back and watch it. YouTube has absolutely crushed that one. But
Watch
here we go. For right now, Pixar has their wish, and this kiss is going to go back, is being restored to the Buzz Lightyear movie, which is still, at this point, slated for a 45-day theatrical exclusive window. And my contention was, good, do it.
That's good.
I want you to do it. Right, and I challenge Disney, and I will do it again here. I challenge Disney. Put it in the trailer. Don't hide it. Advertise the hell out of this thing. Put it in the trailer. Tell everybody you're doing it. Let the chips fall where they may.
Put it in the cut for the Middle East, China, Latin America, and Africa.
Do it.
Do it. Just do it. Just send it to Saudi Arabia and say,
show me how serious
you can only show it
about this.
Do it.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. Your thoughts on this is that I think at this point that the cat's out the bag. They're going to have to let it stick here in the States. Yeah. I wonder if they might not try to pull a last-minute switcheroo and stick this on Disney Plus like they have every other Pixar. I mean, I know they got to sign these contracts with theatrical exhibitioners a couple of months in advance, and we're kind of at that deadline right now, because it's much more easy to conceal failure on Disney Plus than a theater.
That's why I think Chapek needs to let this come in the theaters. He needs to do what he did with Shang-Chi. Let it fail.
And I agree.
Let everyone see the market, because right now, I think had this kiss even been in there and had not been politicized, no one talking about it, most families are like, oh, whatever, quick moment, it's over. Nobody's going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Now that it's back in there and it's politicized,
they've blown it up.
I know families that are going to boycott it. They're not going to take their kids
I have gotten so many comments on this, like, okay, I'm not taking my kids to this, not because we don't like LGBT. No, it's because parents don't want to have to explain sexuality to their 6-year-olds. They just don't want to have that conversation. They're not old enough. Those little minds, they don't understand that. And that's not the age or the time to do it. At least for many parents.
So let the market decide.
Yeah.
Susan Arnold is a capitalist, very successful capitalist. So is Bob Chapek. He came out of the parks. He's a capitalist. And I'm largely a capitalist myself. So I'm like, let the market decide. If this is a massive hit movie, as a friend of mine who is LGBTQ and who is sympathetic to many of these protesters, said to me, if the gay community does not come out and support this movie, we did it to ourselves. So, because he knows people are going to boycott it. So he's like, and he kind of, when he said that, I think he made very well sense that it's not going to be enough of a support base to overcome that boycott, right? I don't think enough people care in the LGBTQ community about this movie to actually spend, $15-18 on it for a half a second flash kiss to support it. I don't really think they really care. And so that's what the market's going to determine this. And then Chapek can do exactly what he did with Shang-Chi. It didn't work. They didn't want it.
Yeah.
They didn't want it.
Disney Plus, everything else from Pixar going forward.
We're not going to do it again. It doesn't work.
I know you've got to run, so we're going to wrap up here. I just want to remind everybody out there, please make sure you check out Kamran Pasha's Patreon page. The link is in the video description below.
And we've got actual Disney insiders on that Patreon that have been really giving me detailed day-to-day stuff that's happening on this issue. So come join the Patreon. You'll see their conversations. What they're revealing is quite fascinating.
Yes, it definitely is. And before you head out today, make sure you drop a comment before you leave. Hit that like button, hit that share button, send it out to the social medias. I've got to retrain YouTube on this channel, but especially please make sure you are still subscribed. And if not, please hit that subscription button. And until next time, folks, good to see everybody and take care.